Welcome to the Washington Stormwater Center Grantwriting Workshop videos. These videos were conducted in September 2012 at 4 locations around Washington State. They were funded through a grant from the Washington Department of Ecology and filmed by Leaping Frog Films. The workshops were organized to provide a morning lecture by Eric Schullenberger, a renowned grant-writing expert, with follow-up comments and advice from a representative of the Washington Department of Ecology. The afternoon session featured a speaker from a local jurisdiction who provided a permittee's perspective on grant writing. A short writing exercise to construct an abstract description of the project and an executive summary followed. The workshop you are about to view features Doug Rice. Doug is the public outreach lead in the King County Department of Natural Resources and Parks Stormwater Services section. He will present on how to write a successful grant from a permittee's perspective.
I'm Doug Rice from King County and represent the Storm Consortium here today and the grants that we've applied for and gotten. And I wanted to say first off, I'm really a wordy writer. And thank God for teams. But it's kind of where I start and then, get cut down. It's okay to be wordy to begin, to get your ideas on the ground and work down from there. I've also made just about every other sin that Eric has talked about this morning and learned from it. I've written 6 grants and I've been successful in 3 of them, so I'm a 50%er, but largely that's almost accidental. And I can't take much credit for all of that. Partly the first one years and years ago was a very small grant. I don't even remember what it was, but I did get it. And then because of that one little success, there was always this kind of grant writer in the background in my bio, so I kept getting asked. And finally, I put together a grant proposal that was largely intended for the group that I'd helped to create, the STORM group, Stormwater Outreach for Regional Municipalities, and grouping together with other jurisdictions to create outreach and education opportunities to kind of work together to make that happen, rather than trying to all of us work independently to meet our permit regulations. So we were successful in getting that together, and Ecology knew that we needed to get outreach and education out there, and so they basically gave us a grant, I often think. And we did a pretty good job of writing it. I look back at it now and I think it wasn't such a great grant, but they were being generous. I think they had faith in us, and we went at it as a whole group, as a consortium. And I think that made a big difference. That's different than what you're here for, is for writing grants for smaller jurisdictions. But sometimes by partnering with other neighboring jurisdictions who have the same interests, you can make a big difference. You can kind of work together, particularly if you have a close relationship for some reason or another. Of the successful grants that I got, the first was about 4 years ago. It was a $1 million grant. It was that grant that was basically written for us, and then we had to write the proposal and go through all the steps. And I wouldn't have been able to do it alone. I had to have a team. I had at least 5 people on that team, plus some outside partners that helped with it to give feedback. Went a long way to being successful with that grant, because if it had been truly sloppy, I think they would have rejected it still. So it's important to cover all your bases in that regard. The other one was more recent. It was a $300,000 grant just this year to work again with the Storm Consortium to convince vehicle owners to check their oil leaks in their car, because we did some background research and discovered that of the people who know they have an oil leak or who discover they have a vehicle leak, 67% of them will attempt to fix it within 3 months. A lot of people don't know they have leaks. A lot of people. And it may be not a typical leak, it might be a brake leak. I discovered that about my own vehicle recently. So to get them to check, just to get them to check, is all the low-hanging fruit, because 67% of them will probably go get it fixed. So it's a high percentage. You got that to work as a background, as a piece of research material, it's a lot easier to go and ask for a grant. So that's been successful. We're working on that now. And of the unsuccessful grants, 3 of them, 2 of them were last year, and 1 was the beginning of this year, the successful one. Of the two last year, and I think there's a lot more to learn sometimes from your failures than from your successes, I'd have to say that the first one of them was prepared too hastily. It was too complex. The grant itself was probably not well written, a lot of people said, within ecology. It was a tree planting idea, and we were trying to put two things together. They only allowed 4 pages. So it was a complex idea to try to squeeze into 4 pages, and that didn't work so well. And there are comments about it when we finally got comments back. And the idea was to work with Storm to do the large education outreach campaign, on the one hand, working with RIA 8 in King County to do a whole tree planting series of trainings and creating a whole volunteer base to go out there and get something done. And combining the idea of stormwater and trees with riparian in trees. The comment back was that they didn't believe we could do it. They just didn't believe it. It didn't sound credible to them, which was kind of hard to take because we knew the power of Storm. We had created a whole campaign and we were extremely successful with it. In 2 years, managed to raise the awareness of Puget Sound and its difficulties, and with Puget Sound Starts Here, within just those 2 years to 25% across the whole region. So we knew that we had the capability to get messages out there about tree planting or whatever. And the RIA had on-the-ground expertise, could put together the workshops that were part of this, and so on and so forth. We knew it could work. But to try to get that message across and make it believable in 4 pages just wasn't possible. We even had a professional grant writer for that. And she helped a lot to trying to get our and my verbosity down, but it still didn't quite work. We were fairly high up there. We just missed the mark, but it didn't work. So you'd never quite know. And I think had we had a better, closer relationship with ecology and the PM, I think that we would have done probably better. The second grant we wrote was a really good proposal. And it was for the toxics and nutrients, some money that they had. And they wanted it to go to us. And we still lost it. We had a great proposal. It was such a good proposal that we offered it again for a later grant and got it no trouble at all. But again, it was not what the program manager was looking for exactly. They wanted something really that had already been done, that was already successful. They didn't want to put any money into research. They didn't want to put any money into advertising. They just wanted us to go out and do it, check for oil leaks. They wanted a standing program. Couldn't we borrow one from some other state? No, nobody else is doing this. The only jurisdiction that had ever done it was still in the process of doing one. That was the city of Seattle. And theirs was more like a training program. Train do-it-yourselfers to check for their own oil leaks. To us, it was really reaching only a few people. We wanted to reach thousands. Our idea was to reach 10,000 people within the period of the grant. And we gave them a program that we knew was correct, the best social marketing out there. We were a whole bunch of social marketers. We knew what we were doing. We wrote a great proposal. They weren't interested. They wanted their on-the-ground program ready to go. And it was unfortunate. We were like in shock afterwards when they rejected it. And they asked Seattle to do the program instead. Now, the irony in this is that another grant, the Gross grant, came out this year. We applied for it with the same grant, polished up, changed a little bit for the grant, and won it easily. We are now ahead of the Seattle program. And that's one of the key things, is they wanted it on the ground because they only had that EPA money for a short period of time and they wanted to make it work and to go out there. We're now ahead of the Seattle program. And the Seattle program has convinced them that they need to do the research and to do the advertising. So it was kind of a lost opportunity across the board, but it does point out what Eric said about knowing what your program manager wants. And we had been working through another ecology contact. And I don't think she had really understood herself what they were looking for and didn't caution us in the right ways. So even if you have those relationships, sometimes it can go south. So it was a learning experience for all of us, and I think ultimately for ecology itself. We're all just trying our best. So the more communication, the better, really. Working across boundaries. I think we've been really successful by doing just that. In all of our grants now, I work a lot outside the boundaries of King County. I can't rely on my own people. They don't know anything about outreach and education. So I turn to other experts out there. You yourselves may be expert in your one field and you'll be the only person within your jurisdiction. How many of you are the permit holder and coordinator for your jurisdiction and the only person doing it? Yeah, you're doing it all, aren't you? So, and most of us have now been with other kinds of coalitions, the permit coordinators group and so on, working together, and it's probably helped you a lot to be able to do that. And I encourage this in terms of grants also. Review each other's grants. Offer to review somebody's grant. Put the word out there. I'd like to review your grants. I'll give you some objective feedback from my point of view, my limited, small point of view. I'll give you some feedback. Well, it benefits them because you can be totally objective, and it benefits you because you get to learn how somebody else has put together a grant and where the failings are. So it benefits both parties. I'd offer it to your other friends out there. I really recommend now, we're beginning to practice this within King County, have your grants written already. Know what grants you really want. I mean, if you had a grant, just so you said, okay, we're going to give you $20,000 or $500,000 or $1 million or whatever it is, what would you do with it? Think about that now. The Coke company put a grant out there and they said, what would you want to do with $1 million? And they were accepting proposals and they didn't really care what area it was in. They just wanted to get ideas in there and see, and then they were going to award some of this money. Well, it caused the RIA 8, for instance, to go wild with ideas, and that got whittled down into some pretty concrete ideas. And that's one of the things that we were trying to work with them. What's your idea list for your jurisdiction? Start putting those down, and each name for a separate file, and begin to add to that file or those projects. And start filling out an outline. You don't have to have a real grant out there to answer those same questions. Start doing it now because, and I'll tell you why, because this last year I wrote 3 grants. But last year, writing those 3 grants, I put in between September and the end of December, I put in 15 extra work days writing those grants because I didn't have them in the can already. There were ideas that we had tossed around within Storm and within our own jurisdictions, but we didn't have it ready. So what I had to do was work my butt off to get them ready. And I don't ever want to do that again in my life. So save yourself the trouble, write them ahead, get them ready. You can adjust them, like Eric says, massage them later to fit the grant that you're working with. It helps you a lot to get clearer. The best thing is that we had already written that vehicle leaks grant so that when the gross grant came along, we were really already ready. We polished it, we worked it, we clarified it, we got it tighter, and it worked better as a grant, and it was a lot easier. The writer shouldn't be the leader particularly. In my opinion, it's better to have a leader who's not the writer, but who's keeping you on task as the writer. And so work it out with your boss or with a coworker or one of your teammates they're independent, they just keep checking on you and coming in. And we have some of that benefit within King County because we have a grant guy who a half-time guy who kind of leads us, is our leader and provides a schedule that we have to live up to. And it's sometimes hard and you get very annoyed with that person, but they're really your friend if you want to be successful. Clear writing. I know this is a problem and I always try to think around this, and certainly for your main sentences and those key points that you're trying to make is that when you're trying to describe something, you know what it means, but somebody else reads it and they don't know what you mean. And even your friends, even your coworkers, our other Storm members, they know exactly what you mean, what you're talking about. But that doesn't mean anybody else does. You've got your language, you've got your education, you've got your discipline, and you understand those words. And it's not even jargon necessarily, just facts that you know, or things that you know these words imply, but somebody else doesn't necessarily know what they are. And so one of the things in that little booklet they've included there is about this idea of clear writing so that you're not supposing that somebody always understands what you're reading. That's why it's valuable to have some of those other people, your friends out there, review your materials and give you feedback. Somebody who doesn't know about what you're doing. Like those sentences that say, it's going to be great. It'll be a great project. Well, how is it going to be great? When is it going to be great? What will it cost for it to be great? How will it become that way? What we're going to do to make it great is what you want to have in there. So that's about it for me. If you have any questions, yeah. The question was that when you're on the ground and implementing the grant, sometimes you realize, well, what you had supposed you would do isn't really the best method. It may be a different kind of method of outreach and education, for instance, or any of the things that you do. And one of the things that we've learned over the last 2 years in implementing the former grant and especially this grant is that there's something called a grant amendment. And you can go back and amend your grant, right? And you can go back and you can amend the budget. You can change the budget, move some numbers around. You can lower it. You can't raise it. We learned that. But you can, well, maybe sometimes you can raise the budget. Somebody has to lower theirs first. Or if there's, you can at the end of the grant, you can ask, is there any other money out there that has not been used in return that we would like to, continue something that we're doing that's working, and here's why. And you can even sometimes get more money at that end of it. But you can amend your budget and you can amend your text, your scope, to reflect those changes in realization. And I think they respect that. They want to know, you want to keep in touch with your grant managers. They want to know what works. I mean, this is largely about ecology, also learning. They want your reports because they want to learn what has worked and what to build on, what to fund next time around. The question was whether with the one toxic nutrient grant, which was funded by EPA through ecology, would it have been a good idea to maybe go over the head of ecology? And I don't think so. I think that it would have been more appropriate to have had more contact with our PM first, our project manager first. And then if there was some conflict, or if we thought that this was, maybe a wrong, earlier on, had we thought it was a wrong step for them to make, then we might have requested such a thing, but I wouldn't have done it without a request. That's not the way to make friends in any way. So it wouldn't be in this case either.